62 dark ships, like obsidian blades, cut through the Atlantic waves. On board, 4,000 warriors know no mercy, fear, or forgiveness. They are 3,000 kilometers from their homeland, heading towards lands they've only heard of in legends, a world of golden domes and organized armies that make the English kingdoms look like pathetic hamlets. For the Norsemen, this is nothing less than a great hunt. For the rest of the world, it's a maritime apocalypse. However, there's one fatal problem that the legendary chieftain of the expedition, Iron Cough's Bjorn, failed to account for. The Vikings mistakenly believe their targets will be defenseless settlements. They are confident the enemy will flee at the sight of dragon heads on their ship's prows. In reality, disappointment awaits them. This time, the adversary has prepared for 15 years, honing their scimitars and building a fleet specifically designed to send them to the bottom. The Vikings are not sailing for plunder. They are sailing into a death trap conceived by the brilliant engineers of the Cordoban Emirate. The question isn't whether they can steal gold, but how many of these 4,000 warriors will remain alive by sunset tomorrow? Welcome to 859 AD, the year the Mediterranean learned to bleed. On the deck of the flagship, the air smells of salt and rotting wood. Hastein II, commander of the fleet, squints at the horizon. By Viking standards, he is already old, yet he is a brutal strategist who has managed to burn half of France. Beside him stands Bjorn, young, ruthless, and carrying the burden of a name that is almost a curse. He is the son of Ragnar Lothbrok. Being the son of a legend is dangerous because it compels one to commit madness to surpass it. Ragnar sacked Paris. Bjorn, however, intends to sack something greater, something impossible. Rome. But to reach Rome, they must first pass through the gates of hell, the Strait of Gibraltar, the waterway connecting the ocean to the Mediterranean Sea. And this strait is guarded by the Umayyad Emirate of Al-Andalus. The Vikings call these lands the Land of Jacob. This is not a war for territory. It is a war of racial and religious annihilation. This is where the logic of invasion collapses. Any sane general would turn back. The coasts of Galicia and Asturias have already met them with a bloody reception. The king of Asturias, Ramiro, offered them not gold, but steel, forcing them to retreat south. The fleet is already battered, the men exhausted, and fresh water supplies dangerously low. Yet Bjorn orders the square sails to be raised and to head south towards the Muslim lands. Why? Why risk 60 ships full of elite warriors against a well-fortified coast? The answer seems suicidal, but to understand it, one must delve into the mind of a 9th-century Viking. They operate not by the rules of modern military logistics but are guided by the principle of prestige. Returning home empty-handed after a failure in northern Spain would be a political death sentence for Bjorn. He cannot return as an unsuccessful son of Ragnar. He needs a victory so bloody and so rich that no one will even remember past defeats. He craves the riches of the Moors, but Emir Muhammad I feels no fear. In a wooden monastery in Cordoba, hundreds of kilometers from the coast, exhausted messengers deliver news to the palace. The Vikings have returned. 15 years ago, the Vikings burned Seville to the ground, hanged the men, and enslaved the women. The national trauma of Al-Andalus was so profound that it permanently altered state policy. The previous peace had sworn that they would never be caught off guard again. This is where the trap springs shut, while Bjorn and Hastein survey the Portuguese coast, contemplating where to dock for supplies of water and fresh meat. They do not see fleeing villagers. What they don't know is that for over a decade, Al-Andalus's naval engineers have been building a network of watchtowers and a rapid response fleet in the ports of Lisbon and Cadiz. These are not merchant ships. They are warships, equipped with catapults and Greek fire, with professional sailors on board who know the sea currents better than their own hands. The Vikings consider themselves invisible. They believe they possess the element of surprise. But at dawn on the third day of sailing, a lookout on Bjorn's ship cries out, pointing east. It's not seagulls. It's not clouds. It's sails. Dozens of them. Triangular sails, gliding swiftly against the wind. The Emirates patrol fleet has gone hunting. A confrontation is inevitable. In the open sea, Viking longships are fast and light, ideal for landing and navigating rivers, but they are low, open, and vulnerable to boarding from taller vessels. The Andalusian ships are floating fortresses. The sound of Viking horns tears through the morning silence. It's a deep, terrifying sound meant to freeze the blood. Shields are raised along the gunwales. "Shield wall," the Jarls shout. 4,000 throats roar in unison. They thirst for blood. They are enraged. And now, they have prey. Or so they think. What unfolds off the coast of Lisbon is far from an ordinary battle. It is a clash of two military technologies at opposite ends of the spectrum. Mighty northern axes against projectile bows and southern engineering prowess. Bjorn Ironside draws his sword, and Hastine takes the helm. The first volley of Muslim arrows blankets the sun, and immediately, the first Viking longship explodes. It doesn't break apart or splinter. It instantly erupts in flames. The Andalusians are using incendiary projectiles with naphtha. The burning liquid adheres to the wooden sails and the bodies of the Norsemen. Water is useless against this fire. The screams of those burning alive mix with the crackling of wood. Panic grips the Vikings, something utterly uncharacteristic for them. They are being destroyed from a distance. Their only recourse is to close the distance, to turn the naval battle into a land battle on wooden decks. They need to reach the enemy before the fire consumes their entire fleet. "Row or we die here today," Bjorn roars. His face is smeared with soot. The Viking rowers, their steel muscles forged in the North Sea, powerfully plunge their oars into the water. The ship's speed increases. The wind whistles. Arrows fly like rain. They enter the range zone, heading straight for the Umayyad fleet. The impact is deafening. Wood against wood, metal against flesh. Chaos reigns. But this is merely an initial skirmish. Bjorn has no idea that this fleet attacking them is not the main army. It is merely bait. The real threat, the true power of the world, awaits them further south. At the mouth of the great Guadalquivir River, the Vikings have stumbled into a hornet's nest, and now the swarm is preparing to attack them. The impact is stunning, but from the prow of the lead longship, carved in the form of a mythical beast, it rams the side of an Andalusian galley with the force of a battering ram. Wood splinters into 1,000 shards, flinging men into the murky, churning waters. For the Vikings, this is not an accident but a call to action. Barely has the ship stopped shaking from the impact than the Norsemen are airborne. They leap across the chasm between the hulls, shouting like demons possessed. They seek no cover. They do not strive for a fair duel. They crave absolute chaos. Here on the slippery, salt-sprayed decks, two worlds that should never have met collide. On one side, the raw, deadly steel of the north, heavy Danish axes capable of splitting a shield and the arm holding it in one blow. On the other, the lethal sophistication of the south, warriors in light chainmail, curved scimitars designed for slashing blows, and military discipline inherited from Roman and Persian armies. A mighty Viking berserker, torso bare, covered in ash and runes etched into his skin, charges at 3 Emirate guards. He receives a cut to the shoulder, then another to the thigh, but he doesn't stop. He feels no pain. The adrenaline from the mushrooms he took before battle has turned him into a biological killing machine. He describes a deadly arc with his axe, decapitating the first guard and breaking the clavicle of the second. The third retreats, engulfed in terror. In his eyes is the question that will haunt the entire Mediterranean in the coming months. What kind of people are these who do not die from their wounds? But victory on this deck does not mean victory in the battle. From the command ship, Bjorn Ironside surveys the scene with the coolness of a strategist. They have captured 3 enemy galleys, destroyed their crews, but lost 2 of their own ships, consumed by that accursed liquid fire that cannot be extinguished. Black smoke rises into the sky in thick plumes, and then Bjorn realizes something that pierces him with a coldness sharper than any Scandinavian winter. The Andalusian ships are not trying to win, they are trying to delay. They are sacrificing ships and men merely to slow the Vikings' advance, to keep them pinned in this part of the ocean. Why would a commander waste resources like this unless he were buying time for something greater? Cut the mooring lines. Throw the burning ships overboard. Bjorn roars. His voice dominates the din of battle as they head south. It is an unpopular decision. Vikings hate leaving plunder, they hate fleeing. But Hastine, the veteran, instantly understands the command. If they linger here for another hour, the main fleet from Seville will catch them and crush them against the coast. The rowers, exhausted and wounded, return to their benches. The drums beat a frantic, panicked rhythm. The remaining 60 ships turn and catch the northerly wind to escape the trap. leaving behind a floating graveyard of burnt wood and bloated corpses. They have survived the Lisbon ambush, but the price has been high, and worst of all, the Atlantic Ocean offers them no respite. They sail south, hugging the Algarve coast. The landscape changes. Green cliffs give way to golden beaches and a merciless sun. The heat becomes a new enemy for men accustomed to fog and ice. Leather and metal armor turn into melting furnaces. As they move forward, lookout spot signals on the shore. Smoke from bonfires, one after another igniting on hilltops, marks the fleet's path. As soon as one ignites, another flares up minutes later to the south, and so on. It's a primitive yet effective signaling system. The Vikings cannot remain unnoticed. Their movements are tracked in real time. Every maneuver, every kilometer traversed, is relayed to the southern garrisons. The Cordoban Emirate seems to function like a perfect mechanism. They know of their approach, know their numbers, and know where they are headed. After 2 days of tense sailing, the horizon opens up. The European coast abruptly drops away, and beyond a strip of dark blue water, the mountains of Africa rise. They have reached the Pillars of Hercules. The Strait of Gibraltar represents the gateway to the Mediterranean, Bjorn's coveted dream, and a natural trap. At its narrowest point, its width does not exceed 14 kilometers. The currents here are treacherous. They could smash the ships against the rocks if the helmsman wavers for even a second. And most importantly, whoever controls the strait controls the world. Bjorn squints at the northern coast of the strait. There lies the city of Algeciras, and behind it, the majestic rock of Gibraltar. Everything looks too calm. Cross? Asks Z, eyeing the churning waters where the Atlantic and Mediterranean clash with disbelief. The eastern wind. They have come this far not to turn back at the gates. They are going to enter the inner sea, to accomplish an act of unprecedented scale for the Vikings. But as soon as they cross the threshold, the invisible boundary between the two seas, the reality of their situation changes. The Atlantic is an open ocean where one can hide in infinity. The Mediterranean, however, is a closed lake, patrolled by ancient empires. They have not entered a hunting ground. They have entered a cage, and the keeper of this cage is ready to slam the door shut behind them. The moment the Viking ships surge into the blue expanse, a shadow appears in the port of Algeciras. These are not warships. They are something worse. They are the calm before the storm. For the emir's plan was not to stop them at Lisbon. The plan was to let them in, let them feel confident, let them venture so deep into the belly of the beast that retreat would become impossible. Bjorn senses the change in the air. The wind here smells different, of spices, of ancient dust, and of danger. Keep your eyes open, Hastein mutters, stroking the hilt of his sword. This sea does not welcome us here. And he is right, because just a few hours after entering the Mediterranean, the first city appears on the horizon. It's not a fishing village, it's a walled city, wealthy, proud Algeciras, the pearl of the strait. To the Vikings, it seems like ripe fruit, ready for the taking. They see the mosque's dome glinting in the sun. They see the port warehouses. Greed eclipses fear. They have forgotten the trap at Lisbon, forgotten the signal fires. They see only gold. Bjorn gives an order that will seal their immediate fate. Land, and take the city before sunset. It is the classic mistake of a hungry predator. They fall for the bait without checking if it's hooked. And in Algeciras, the hook is sharp and poisoned. What they are about to find within these walls is not a defenseless civilian population. It is a garrison praying to Allah that the pagans are foolish enough to attempt a landing. The keels of the longships scrape the sand of the beach. The Vikings leap into the shallow water with a roar, confident that the plunder has begun. But the walls of Algeciras are eerily full of silent men. Bowstrings are taut, cauldrons are simmering. A massacre is about to begin. But this time, the Vikings do not hold the knife. The sands of Algeciras do not remain white for 10 seconds. A signal is given from the walls by hand, and the sky darkens. It's not night. It's a cloud of arrows, so dense it blots out the afternoon sun. The sound is repulsive. A wet, dull thud of hundreds of iron tips piercing chainmail and flesh simultaneously. Bjorn Ironside stops his run along the shore. What he sees is not a battle. It is a methodical extermination. The defenders of Algeciras fight not with the frenzied rage of berserkers. They fight with mathematical precision. They shoot, reload, shoot again. It is a mechanical, emotionless rhythm, and as the Vikings attempt to raise their shields to form a defensive wall, javelins fly into them, and the defenders retreat before the Norse axe can touch them. "To the ships," Hastane shouts, dragging a man with an arrow protruding from his chest. For the first time in many years, the great pagan army turns its back to the enemy, out of sheer tactical terror. They cannot fight like this on the beach, nor under such a rain of death. The survivors scramble into the water, desperately swimming towards the longships, while the defenders laugh and continue to shoot at the men floundering in the sea. The fleet withdraws, beaten and humiliated. They have lost many of their warriors. They have lost their factor of fear. They cannot return north without encountering the Lisbon fleet again. Staying here is impossible. There remains only one direction: southern Africa. Crossing the strait, they see before them a coast, now known as Morocco. For a man from Scandinavia, it's like landing on the moon. The heat is suffocating. The air shimmers. They reach the town of Nicoya. Here, the garrison is smaller, meaning the element of surprise might still be possible. The fury of the defeat at Algeciras must find an outlet, and Nicoya pays for it. The Vikings descend upon the town like a plague. This time, there are no impenetrable walls. The defenses are breached within an hour. The subsequent massacre is absolute. The town is plundered to its foundations. But among the spoils, they find something chilling: prisoners, dark-skinned Berbers and African warriors, whom the Vikings call the Blue People, due to the color of the dye in their clothes, or perhaps a mistranslation of their legends. They have never seen such people. They touch them with curiosity and brutality, wondering if they are demons or spirits of the scorched earth. They capture dozens, not for ransom, but as exotic trophies, living proof that they have reached the ends of the known world. But curiosity does not fill coffers with gold, nor does it fill bellies. Bjorn studies his stolen maps. His finger traces a line northeast towards the heart of the sea. There lie the Balearic Islands, and beyond the boot of Italy, Rome. The obsession reignites in his eyes. Africa was a strange detour, a nightmare of heat and exotic blood, but it is not the main prize. "We sail at dawn," he orders. "The real gold is on the islands." However, the Mediterranean Sea must teach them one last lesson before allowing them to proceed further. The Vikings are masters of the Atlantic. They know how to read the ocean's tides and storms, but the Mediterranean is treacherous. There are no tides, but there are winds that arise from nowhere. As they sail towards the islands of Majorca and Minorca, the sky takes on an ominous purple hue. The wind dies completely, and the sea becomes a mirror of oil. Complete silence. And then, the mistral hits. A cold, furious north wind descending from the Alps and striking the sea with the force of a divine hammer. The waves, short and steep, begin to batter the ships from the side. This is not the long ocean swell that allows for gliding over waves. This is chaotic swell that breaks wood. The longships, designed for flexibility, begin to groan under the pressure. Amidst the storm, one ship capsizes. 40 men, weighed down by armor and gold stolen in Africa, sink like stones in the blue abyss. No screams. The wind swallows them. Bjorn ties himself to the mast of his ship, staring into the darkness. They are being swept away, pulled eastward. Nature is carrying them exactly where they wanted to go, but at a speed that could kill them all. When the storm finally subsides, days later, the fog dissipates, and what they see before them is not Rome, nor are they the Balearic Islands. They have been blown far further north. Before them lies the calm and rich southern coast of France, and at the mouth of a river, bathed in sunlight, a city gleams. It looks like Rome. It smells like Rome. Bjorn smiles. The gods, he thinks, have guided us through the storm, straight to our goal. "Prepare the axes," he whispers. We have arrived in Rome. But Bjorn makes a fatal mistake, a historical error. This city is not Rome, and the man ruling these lands is not a defenseless pope, but a Frankish count waiting for a chance to hang pagan heads on his walls. A geographical confusion is about to turn into a comical and bloody tragedy. The city looms before them, magnificent, built of white marble that dazzles under the Italian sun. Its walls are high, its towers touch the sky, and the sound of church bells floats in the air. To the northern barbarian, such luxury can only mean one thing: Rome, Bjorn whispers with bloodshot, greedy eyes. The city of emperors. In reality, they are in Luni, an ancient Roman city on the northern coast of Italy. But Bjorn's geographical mistake is about to become a nightmare for the locals. However, there's a technical problem. The walls of Luni are impregnable. A frontal assault would be suicide. And after the lesson at Algeciras, Hastain does not wish to sacrifice more men against stone and arrows. If they cannot enter by force, they will enter by deception. Hastain devises one of the most audacious and theatrical plans in Viking military history. They send a messenger to the city gates. The man carries no weapon. He walks weeping, his head bowed. Our chieftain is dead. The messenger lies to the guards on the crenellated walls. He repented his sins on his deathbed. The bishop of Luni, a pious, perhaps too naive man, sees a divine opportunity. The conversion and burial of a pagan king would be a massive spiritual victory. The heavy wooden and iron doors, which no axe could break, slowly creak open on rusty hinges. A funeral procession enters. A group of unarmed Vikings carries a heavy, crudely built wooden coffin. They march solemnly towards the cathedral, surrounded by priests waving censers and chanting in Latin. The entire city comes out to watch. The people of Luni watch with curiosity as these fair-haired giants mourn their leader. The atmosphere is filled with the tranquility of religious triumph. The coffin is placed before the main altar. The bishop raises his hands, preparing to begin the mass. Absolute silence descends. And then, the coffin lid flies open. Hastain is not dead. He leaps out of the box, sword in hand, roaring like a cornered beast. Before the bishop can finish his Latin prayer, Hastain's blade pierces his chest. This is the signal. The mourning Vikings draw axes and knives hidden beneath their clothes. Simultaneously, the rest of the army, waiting in ambush at the opened gates, charges into the city like an unstoppable flood. The cathedral turns into a slaughterhouse. Blood defiles the pristine white marble altar. What follows is not a battle, it is systematic looting. The Vikings take everything. Gold from chalices, silks, from nobles to young women. Bjorn sits on the bishop's throne, sipping consecrated wine, convinced he is the new Caesar. He has conquered Rome. He has surpassed his father, but the euphoria is short-lived. During the interrogation of survivors, as a local merchant is brought before Bjorn, the truth is revealed. The trembling man, gasping for breath, explains that this is not Rome. Rome is hundreds of kilometers to the south. This is merely Luni, a provincial town, a pale shadow of the capital. Bjorn's face darkens. Shame is more bitter than defeat. They have used their best trick. They risked everything to plunder a second-rate town. Kill him, Bjorn orders coldly. Leave nothing behind. If it is not Rome, let it be ashes. They load the ships with spoils from Luni. But the atmosphere in the fleet has changed. They have gone too far. They have awakened the wrath of all of Italy, and the Strait of Gibraltar is still blocked by Muslims. The question is no longer what else they can steal, but how the hell they will get out of this closed lake alive. To return home, they must once again pass through the maw of the Cordoban Emirate. And this time, Emir Mohammed, I will not send a patrol. He has assembled the largest fleet that the Western Mediterranean has seen in a century. The Vikings consider themselves hunters. But as they turn their ships westward towards the exit, they do not know they are sailing directly into a wall of fire and wood waiting for them in the strait. The Mediterranean Sea is a trap. It is calm, beautiful, and seduces one into lingering too long, and the Vikings lingered too long. They sail west, back towards the exit, but their ships are no longer the agile predators that entered months earlier. They are now fat beasts, sitting low in the water, slow and dangerously laden. The holds are packed with silver, silks, golden chalices, and slaves captured in Africa and Luni. Greed is their anchor. A heavy longship is a dead longship, but not a single man on board is willing to throw his fortune overboard for speed. It is a sunk cost fallacy that becomes a death sentence. As they approach the Pillars of Hercules, the mood changes. The sky clears, revealing the unmistakable silhouette of the Rock of Gibraltar. This should be the path to freedom, to the Atlantic Ocean, and home. But the horizon is blocked. Emir Mohammed I has kept his word. He did not send a blocking party. He has deployed an armada. 20, 30, 40 dromons, form a continuous line from shore to shore. They are not patrolling. They are waiting. They have had weeks to study the currents, position themselves with the wind advantage, and prepare their war machines. Bjorn Ironside looks at the wall of wood and Latin sails from the prow of his overloaded ship. He knows basic mathematics. 60 heavily laden Viking ships against a fresh, technologically superior fleet. There is no passage, Hastein mutters. They want us to surrender, but Vikings do not surrender. Surrender means slavery or public execution in Cordoba. The only way out is to break the wall. Full sails. Prepare for impact. Bjorn shouts. It is an act of desperation. The Vikings try to repeat the Lisbon tactic, to close the distance and board. But the Andalusian admiral, a man named Hashim ibn Abdulaziz, has learned his lesson. He does not let them get close. As the Vikings enter the kill zone, the sky once again erupts in fire. Catapults on the decks of the Arab galleys launch sealed ceramic pots. When they shatter against the wood of the Norwegian ships, they release naphtha. Seconds later, flaming arrows ignite the liquid. The sea turns into a cauldron. This time the massacre is one-sided. The Viking ships, too heavy to maneuver, cannot dodge the projectiles. One by one, they turn into floating torches. Slaves chained in the hold scream, choking on smoke before the flames reach them. Molten gold drips down the decks. Bjorn watches as his fleet disintegrates. 20 ships burn in the first 15 minutes. Men leap overboard, where Muslim archers hunt them like ducks in a pond. Discipline crumbles. This is no longer a battle. It is a race for individual survival. Throw the cargo overboard. Throw everything. Hastein roars. This is the most agonizing order a Viking can hear. Fighting back anger, the warriors reluctantly, but tearfully, begin to cast silver chests, statues, and armor overboard. The ships, lightened by tons of dead weight, rise slightly in the water. They partially regain their legendary maneuverability, but the encirclement is almost complete. In this chaos, Bjorn makes a desperate decision. He spots a breach in the enemy formation near the African coast, where the currents are stronger and the rocks dangerously close to the surface. No sane captain would go there. It is suicide. This is precisely why the Andalusians did not block the passage to the rocks. Turn the helm sharply, Bjorn commands. His ship, followed by a handful of survivors, rushes towards the white foam where waves crash against rocks. The wooden hulls scrape against submerged rocks. The sound is agonizing, like breaking bones. A ship behind them embeds itself into a sharp rocky peak and sinks in seconds. But Bjorn's ship passes, and so does Hastein's. They emerge on the other side, gaunt, with torn sails and a depleted crew. But they are in the Atlantic. They look back. What they see is a slaughter. Out of the 60 ships that attempted to cross the strait, only 20 survived. 40 ships were lost, 2/3 of their army dead or captured. Thousands of men, tons of gold, all at the bottom of the strait. They have escaped, yes, but they are not conquerors returning home. They are fugitives. A deathly silence reigns on the surviving ships. No songs, no boasting, only the sound of the wind and the groans of the wounded. Bjorn looks at his empty hands. He has lost more men in an hour than his father did in his entire life. Yet, fate has a twisted sense of humor, because as they lick their wounds and head north, they believe the worst is behind them. They forget one crucial detail. They have no food. They threw supplies overboard for speed. No water, and they are in the middle of the Atlantic. To reach home, they need one last stop. A stop in a land that already hates them, on a coast that has already rejected them. They will have to land again on Christian kingdom of Navarre, and there, in the mountains of Pamplona, a surprise awaits them that has nothing to do with ships or fire, but is linked to a kidnapping that will change the entire economy of the expedition. Bjorn and Hastein, desperate, are about to undertake one last audacious act that will either save them from complete ruin or bury them permanently. The Atlantic is not an ocean. It is a salty desert that kills with thirst while rocking on waves. For the 20 surviving ships, the weeks after the disaster in the Strait of Gibraltar are a slow agony. There is no glory, no appeals to gods, only emaciated men sucking boiled leather to cheat hunger and staring with empty eyes at the gray horizon. They have lost their friends, their fleet, and most agonizing for a Viking, their loot. The gold from Africa and Luni now rests at the bottom of the sea, guarded by fish. Bjorn Ironside looks at his crew. He knows what they are thinking. If they return home now, poor and defeated, they will not be hailed as heroes. They will become the laughingstock of Scandinavia. A jarl without gold is a jarl without power. Bjorn needs a turnaround. He needs an economic miracle. And this miracle has a name and a surname, but it lives far from the coast. The ships dock in the Bay of Biscay. But this time, the strategy changes radically. They are no longer an invading horde sweeping all before them. They are too few for that. Now they are elite commandos, a rapid response unit. Bjorn and Hastein gather the remaining strongest men. They leave the ships hidden and embark on a suicidal march inland. Their target is not a village or a church, it is the kingdom of Pamplona, and their prize is the most protected man in the region. But desperation is the best fuel for audacity. The operation is swift, brutal, and silent. The details are lost in the chaos, but the outcome is historic. They do not seek to kill. Killing is free. They need a live king. By the time Garcia Iñiguez realizes what is happening, a Scandinavian sword is already at his throat, and he is being dragged away from his guards. The king of Pamplona, lord of the mountains, is now a hostage, and this is where the real battle begins, not with axes, but with words. Viking emissaries arrive in the capital with a simple demand. They need gold, not a chest, not a bag. They need the value of an entire fleet. They demand 70,000 gold coins. The figure is astronomical. It is a sum capable of undermining the economy of a small medieval kingdom. Panic reigns at the court of Pamplona. Pay and bankrupt the kingdom, or allow the king to die and unleash a civil war for the succession. They pay. Wagons laden with gold are sent to the Viking camp. For Bjorn, seeing this gold is like breathing again. In one masterful move, he has compensated for the losses of a 3-year campaign. He has turned a catastrophic military defeat into a resounding financial success. They are no longer fugitives from Gibraltar. They are men who have kidnapped a king and bled a kingdom dry. With the holds of the 20 surviving ships refilled, morale soars. The men laugh, polishing their weapons again. The journey home no longer seems a shameful march. It is a triumphant parade. But the sea, like a malevolent creditor, always collects its interest. They sail north, rounding the French coast. Home is near. They can almost feel the cold Baltic air, but the ships are badly damaged. Years of sailing, shipworms, direct collisions, and Mediterranean storms have weakened the hulls, making them as fragile as eggshells. Off the coast of Brittany, an autumn storm catches them, not a hurricane, but a constant, debilitating assault. The sea pounds and pounds, and then, the unthinkable happens, not from enemy fire, but from pure material fatigue. 2 ships split in 2. There is no time to save anything. The ransom gold from Pamplona, the cursed gold they have just obtained, pulls the men to the bottom with terrifying speed. Bjorn watches from his ship, powerless as fortune slips away again. It's some cosmic joke. Victory, defeat, victory, defeat. In the end, as their homeland appears on the horizon, only a shadow of the expedition remains. Out of the 60 proud ships that set out 3 years ago, only a handful returned. Out of 4,000 warriors, barely a few hundred remain alive. They arrive in the fjords. Silence greets the black ships. Women and children run to the pier, searching for familiar faces. Most find only emptiness. Bjorn Ironside steps ashore. He is rich. Yes, he has brought enough gold to solidify his position, but his gaze has changed. He has seen Greek fire, seen the walls of what he thought was Rome. He has experienced the terror of being trapped in a merciless sea. The sagas claim it was a victory. Poets will sing of the great Mediterranean expedition for centuries. They will say Bjorn conquered distant cities and defied empires, but the historical truth is far colder. It was a logistical disaster, saved at the last moment by a kidnapping. Nevertheless, Bjorn's journey had consequences no one foresaw at the time, consequences that affected not the Vikings, but their enemies. Because while Bjorn was licking his wounds in the north, in the south, the Emir of Cordoba and the Christian kings of Europe learned something over the decade. They learned that the Vikings were not invincible demons. They bled, they burned, and with determined defense, they could be destroyed. The mythical fear of the Northmen was broken at the Strait of Gibraltar. Bjorn retreats to his lands, rich and famous, but the age of the Vikings begins to change. The days of easy raids are coming to an end. The world is arming itself. But Bjorn's story does not end with his death in bed. It concludes with a final irony, a final legend that perfectly summarizes the blend of reality and myth in his life. It is said that years later, when he finally died, it was not from a sword, but from the very pride that nearly killed him in the Mediterranean. And although the expedition of 859 AD was technically and militarily a disaster with immense losses, it achieved what no other raid had done before. It drew a map of fear in the heart of Europe, connecting the frozen north to the warm south with a line of blood. Bjorn Ironside showed that the world is vast, dangerous, and if you have enough courage, it can be plundered. But what happened to those left behind? What happened to the prisoners, the stragglers, the ships that did not sink but also did not return? The official history ends at the docks with Bjorn's return, but the real story, the dirty and complex one, leaves a trail of blood and strangeness that remains in the south, because not all Vikings died, and not all escaped. In the chaos of the retreat at the Guadalquivir and the disaster in the strait, several ships were cast ashore on the Andalusian coast. Hundreds of men, surrounded, cut off from their fleet, faced the dilemma of survival we spoke of at the beginning, to die in battle or to adapt. What happened to them is one of the strangest epilogues of the Viking Age. Emir Muhammad I, a pragmatic man, looked at these captured fair-haired giants. He could have cut off their heads and piled them at the gates of Cordoba. He did that to many, but in others, he saw an opportunity. They were war machines, loyal to whoever gave them gold and food. Thus, the unthinkable happened. The fire worshippers, the northern demons, converted to Islam. They settled on the plains near Seville. They traded Thor's hammer for prayer at Mecca. They married local women, and in a twist of historical irony, these former raiders ended up breeding cattle and producing the region's famous cheese. The wolves became shepherds. But while some Vikings integrated, the Mediterranean armed itself. Bjorn Ironside's raid had a side effect he never anticipated. It awoke a sleeping dragon, Islamic naval engineering. The Emirate of Cordoba decided it would never be humiliated again. In the years that followed, the shipyards of Seville and Almeria worked day and night. They built a permanent fleet, not for trade, but for hunting. They designed faster ships, organized coastal patrols, and early warning systems. The western Mediterranean became an impregnable fortress. Bjorn managed to penetrate because he was an anomaly, a surprise. However, by doing so, he permanently closed the path for all who might follow him. No other Scandinavian king would be able to replicate such a scale. The Mediterranean learned to fight back. In the north, as his legend grew, fueled by gold and the fictions of skalds, Bjorn, in his deepest solitude, understood the truth. He had reached the limits of the Viking world. He had seen civilizations whose complexity surpassed the capabilities of his kinsmen. The world was shrinking, becoming more inaccessible. The era of easy raids was fading into the past. The raid of 859 AD was not the beginning of a new golden age of Viking expansion southward. It was the high point of the tide. The wave broke against the shores of Algeciras and the rocks of Gibraltar and began to recede. Bjorn Ironside died many years later, rich and respected. But the true death, the death of his way of life, began that day in the strait when Greek fire consumed his ships. All that remains for us is a final reflection, a final glance at this man and the myth of him, and why, despite the tactical disaster, we still talk about this madness. 1,000 years later, in Bjorn's hall in Scandinavia, the air smells of wood smoke and roasted meat. But for the returning men, the smells of memory are different. It's the smell of burning pitch, the smell of the stinging salt of the Mediterranean. The skalds, the court poets, are already weaving their tales. They sing of vanquished dragons and marble cities that yielded to northern terror. They sing that Bjorn Ironside is a god walking among men, invulnerable to steel. And as long as mead flows, young warriors who never sailed south listen with shining eyes, dreaming of their own chance. But Bjorn does not smile. He knows the true cost of glory. 62 ships went out, 20 returned. 4,000 men set out. Less than 1,000 returned. The wealth sparkling in the chests is immense. Yes, it will be enough to buy the loyalty of an army for a generation. But the price for it is the annihilation of an entire generation of veterans. The nickname Ironside takes on a new meaning in the semi-darkness of this hall. It is not about magic, not about impenetrable skin. It is about being the only one who could walk through hellfire, poisoned arrows, and deadly storms and emerge alive. His iron is not his strength. It is his absurd ability to survive his own mistakes. Outside, the northern winter begins to freeze the fjords in ice. The sea becomes gray and harsh. The expedition of 859 AD marks an invisible boundary in the sands of time. It was then that the Viking expansion encountered an insurmountable wall. In the north, in England and France, they fought against fragmented feudal kingdoms, but in the south, they encountered the might of organized superpowers. The Emirate of Cordoba and the Byzantine Empire, though only grazed, possessed logistics and technologies that revealed the true nature of the Vikings, brave pirates on open wooden ships. Bjorn looks at his sword. It is pitted with nicks from Arab steel. It will never be returned. He knows no one will return with such a fleet. The Vikings' most deadly weapon, surprise, is exhausted. The South has awakened. Watchtowers in Spain, chains in Italian ports, patrol fleets in North Africa. The world has closed in. But there is one triumph that no one can take away from him. Not even historical truth can deny him what he did. The impossible. He sailed further than his father Ragnar, crossed the ocean, the forbidden strait, raided 3 continents, and returned to tell the tale. He bought himself immortality not through strategy, but through sheer brute audacity. The youth in the hall shout his name. Bjorn, Bjorn. They drink to the conqueror of Rome, even though it was loony. They drink to the man who defied the world. Bjorn raises his chalice, drinks. The taste is sweet, but the aftertaste is bitter. He won the game of glory, but lost the game of war. The Viking era in the Mediterranean did not end ingloriously a century later. It ended here, with the return of these broken ships and these rich but traumatized men. The entrance door bursts open, and a gust of icy wind with snow rushes in. The fire in the hearth flickers, casting long shadows on the walls. Shadows resembling Latin sails and curved scimitars. Bjorn Ironside closes his eyes. In the darkness, he can still see the Greek fire burning in the black straits.